Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
This episode is right in line with our total theme of this podcast, and it's coping with life's obstacles and hardships as a couple.
And to be honest, this might be one of those episodes where you hear me not as chipper or as bold as possible, because I'm actually still present to the impact of a hardship in our life that we'll, very briefly share about. But I wanted to come on and be real with you all. We went for a walk. We said, what about this week's episode? And there were other great topics we could have covered. But I said, not only is this real for us, as in we're facing something that feels really hard, but also the clients we've been talking to, right, are facing things. And it's funny because it's like month 1 into the new year. And, you're like, new year, new you, right? Like all of those goals.
Oh, no.
And then it's like, these hardships. And if that is the case for you, then no, you are not alone if that's coming up. So just some examples of what's been coming up for clients. Challenges with adult children, some really hard conversations with them, hard relationships with younger kids, maybe different circumstances that feels like, man, how come I cannot get on the same page with my young child? The in-laws, and how they're treating you or one of you, getting let go from a job that was so linked to identity and a source of power and significance. Hard medical news has even shown up with our clients. And so notice that these are obstacles and hardships that aren't directly related to the marriage. Mm-hmm. However, of course, the downward impact can be that it does impact your marriage. And we'll explain more on that in a minute.
Which might be that, let's say your partner or yourself, you're having this event happen to you in your individual life, and then it has you feel, I don't want to say like depressed, but down, defeated, drained. I didn't even mean for all those to be D words. And then you wake up and you can be more critical or short with your partner, but even being an
reactive
attitude of disengaged, some would call it just negative. And when that goes on for a few days, that just creates an atmosphere of your partner maybe not wanting to be around you, right? So you're not making deposits, you're not engaging, you're not having great conversations, and you feel like you're alone maybe, because that is something that happens maybe for a certain segment of the male partners. I know we can tend to pull ourselves away, and sometimes it's under the idea of, I'm just giving them space to deal with what they're dealing with, but it never really helps. We talk about the 5 R's and repair, and when you have a designated time to pause and reflect so you can down-regulate, yes, but especially when it's not communicated or you're just saying to yourself, I'm just going to give them their space, then maybe that's not what they need. And so it totally isolates the partner, and then they feel like, or here they are, dealing with all this completely on their own.
Yeah, so before we get into kind of the heart of how to deal with these obstacles and hardships, I know that some of you are going, okay, Jocelyn, you can't leave us hanging in terms of what you're dealing with. And I want to be somewhat vague because these things aren't resolved with the people in our life and, need to have conversations with them. But it feels as though there have been 3 big relationships in my life that in the last month or 2, there have been some things that really hurt me, right? And I'm not saying I'm just the victim, right? I know that there are ways in which I probably impacted them as well. But yeah, some very close relationships. We have some unresolved conversations, some things said that feel hurtful, and that it's going to take something to mend them and repair, right? So we'll perhaps keep you posted on that as we have those conversations.
Yeah, and I appreciate your willingness to be as real about what we're going through. I think that's part of why the tools land, this podcast episode lands to you, the listener. And usually what happens, the coping strategy is actually to try to not deal with the emotion. And it's really like, let's just act. Let's just take a different action. I'll try to do something, right? My partner's not even on my side, so let me just do something. So you tend to ignore or try to push out whatever real feeling that is there. And like I said, that has one partner usually withdraw and pull away or potentially lash out. And that's, when you think about that, you're like, well, why would I do that, right? One partner is really dealing with something. And if it goes on for a couple of days, I do know that male partners start to get critical of their partner's attitude. They might say something like, pick up your side of your responsibilities.
Just move
Why
on.
are you negative? Just get on, move, like different versions of that. And so you almost tend to lash out. Not even the person that's affected, but the partner that should be supportive is even lashing out. And we had that conversation today. Both of these cases are really about, let me try to protect myself.
It's protective mechanisms completely. And I think that even myself in experiencing this hardship, before I got vulnerable with you, which we'll talk about here in a moment, I could have, if I was just trying to survive and move on and just get through the days with this going on, I probably would have been more reactive and short, and then maybe a lash out, right? Because I'm trying to protect myself from something, which is really my own emotion or the thing that feels hard. And maybe my attitude would have you pull back. Like you said, right? Let me just give her space, and I'm going to protect myself from the way she's feeling and acting towards me. So do you see how this can really be this spiral that goes from being an outside circumstance to now impacting your intimacy and connection as a couple?
Well, then the partner that's dealing with that emotion or that situation then feels like what? You don't have my back, right? And at a basis, you're going to go through hard things. We've been saying that as a theme the last couple of episodes. That's life is challenge. Some would say life is actually suffering and it can't be avoided. But in these cases, your best intent to give them space, for example, has them feel isolated. Why don't you ever have my back? So marriage is supposed to be where you have a partner that is there to support you and to understand you, and then you can be expressed and accepted and validated, and you can deal with life's hardships with someone else. I mean, that's very foundational to what a relationship and a marriage is supposed to be.
It is. So the first point, you said it briefly, but I want to make sure it's clear. The first point here, because we're trying to provide you some structure to this big topic around life's obstacles, is don't resist challenges in life. Right? They are going to happen. And I know because we're in it, it's like, no, come on. I just want to experience the happy times and the good times. Please, I don't want to experience this. But that phrase is so true. What you resist persists. So it's like surrender into it. And then a great point here about there's the challenge, but also don't resist the emotion that comes up with it.
That's probably the main thing.
And the client that we were talking to right before this, who had an outside obstacle happening, was not letting themselves actually be with the emotion coming up. They kind of, we'll go more into this too, but they talked about it. You know, I feel kind of like this, and they talked about the events and they talked about the circumstances. And I said, well, have you let yourself cry about this? No. And it's like, I can tell it's right there. Like just, and this person, and I can relate to this, said, I'm not a crier, right? And how many of us grew up even not feeling comfortable letting ourselves express sadness and let the tears come out, right? And that's in and of itself a profound journey to go down, is like letting yourself actually not just say how you feel, but express the emotion.
And crying isn't the only way to express emotion.
No, that's
just didn't want to leave some of the male partners might have said, oh, well, I'm not going to express emotion that way. I mean, maybe you don't as a personality, but I think that might be an invitation for a lot of men as well, is if you actually experience the emotion, you might find out that there is sadness there, and sadness, to move that, you do want to express it. And a lot of times that can be through tears, but you can move emotion through certain physical activity, through certain other body movements or breath
work,
yelling, screaming, using your voice. So, I mean, different ways, but I think it is important for a lot of us to let sadness be expressed, and if that's through tears, then for sure. So I wanted to segment this into some steps, in a way. What you need to do as a couple when you're faced with life's obstacles and with the hardships, which really speaks more to the emotion of the challenge, is you have to, number one, express it. You're going to have to express it. You're going to have to, with your partner, allow for that so that there's connection there. There's a feeling of support there. And in doing so, it's going to bring you a certain feeling of relief from that emotion. We'll go more into that. And then you can get into the next path or series of discovering the solution or the actions to take in regards to the challenge itself. That would have to be a part 2. So what we want to focus on is the real emotion side and the supporting with your partner. So express, connect, and relief.
I love how you always put things into structure, right? So around this expression, I can, really get from just even the last few days and this coming up that because I'm so much of I can get through this, I'm a tough person, I can just focus on our business and our baby. I had to, though, get real with myself and get real with you and be vulnerable. That word vulnerability, right? It doesn't mean always just crying, right? That's not just what vulnerability is, which I think some people think that. It's just be honest and be real about the human emotion that you're facing that's really coming up for you. So don't just talk about it like I feel hurt. I feel sad. I feel mad. Like maybe you're mad at someone. Maybe you feel hurt and damaged by someone or some outside circumstance. And so you can just be like, I'm pissed at them and I'm mad at them. And it's like, okay, yes, but anger is often at the surface, but beneath it is something much more like feeling sad or rejected or neglected or fearful, right? There's usually something more vulnerable beneath it. So express it. And I think, Aaron, you on the other side, like you actually listened to me. Right? Like you gave me that space and continue to.
Yeah. And that moment allows for the connection. So I guess it seems like it's easier, I would say, when it's not about you, the partner, right? To listen to the emotion. But there are ways that you want to show up for your partner that allows them to feel safe and to trust and to go deep enough to be that vulnerable. So yes, it is about listening, but in that listening, you have to accept, whatever emotion that they have, that they're expressing. And as I thought about this recent, time with us, I was listening, but it wasn't necessarily allowing you to go deep enough to the emotion side. So as I think about this event, it's like you were expressing, but then there was a way in which I was initially showing up in front of you that didn't yet create the connection, because the connection is only when you get vulnerable enough to share the real emotion. And then in how I show up for you allows the connection to stay there, right? So we're literally just discovering this, I think, as we talk. So because we sat there for maybe 5 or 7 minutes, and I'm just kind of responding to what you're saying, but something must have changed that allowed you to get to the emotion, because we had a complete change in the experience.
It's great you bring that up, actually. So here we are. What he's talking about is we're on the bathroom floor in our room after we put our baby to sleep a couple nights ago. And at first I was more like just expressing the surface stuff, the feeling angry, the feeling wronged, the feeling, again, I'm hurt. I would say I'm hurt.
Did you say talking about like details and facts?
Right.
Maybe?
Talking about the details, then who said what and all that. And at first, it did feel a little bit like you were listening, but you're right. The emotion hadn't fully come out. So to answer your question as to what shifted, what I think it is somewhat that you started, and we've brought this up on other episode before, is like you started to go down the path with me. And maybe you have better words for this, but what I mean is like you kind of like, this isn't exactly how you said it, but you were kind of like, you're right. That was horrible.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
That I cannot believe it. That you're right. That is unacceptable. Kind of like going down that flow with me, which then allowed me to almost feel like, yeah, okay, yes. Because going back to what you said earlier, I had said this earlier in the day. And then even the client before this said, I don't feel like you have my back. You're not on my team. And part of it was I was looking for you to somewhat be territorial of me, right? I know that sounds interesting, but like kind of this primal, like I want you to be on, protect me, protect us, our family, our unit. And so when you started to go down that, like, you're right, that is so wrong and that's unacceptable and I can't believe they would say that, that's horrible. Then it like was like, okay, I can say it and I can be real. And then I just started sobbing. Would you think that's true?
You're really right. I hadn't thought about this all the way through, but I think it's as you were sharing initially, I was probably more talking about what you could do. I was trying to provide you like actions to take. Right. And that's not what you want to do as a partner initially. So there's some version of feeling the emotion with your partner. And yes, there's help soothing, but I think it comes right after. I think there's acknowledging and getting into the emotion with them. Now, you were asking me like, you need to get on there and send this message. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like that's out of character. It's not in integrity for me to do that. So we were talking about the details still. So this is a really interesting thing. At some point, I think you just have to get in there and validate and get into the emotion with your partner. Putting aside that whatever action you would take, I think the times I've really supported you the most emotionally is you're right. I get in there with you. And I like this. I just go sometimes to the, I go to the extreme, which like has you feel that I'm with you, but then also it has this other side effect where you're like, okay, well, we're not going to do that. But no, I got in there with you and I validated just how
hurtful,
wrong and how hurtful that was. And I went in there and just, validated it with you. I let myself cry with you. And I started to really feel the emotion and how much I was impacted. Now, I think initially that was probably the gap in our connection was you were feeling it and I'm just like maybe listening or talking about actions. And I wasn't feeling the impact for myself. So as soon as I let myself get in the emotion with you, and at that point we were both crying. And then I did provide assurance after, but that probably takes us to the next step. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's perfectly said. So do you want to go into the next step for them?
Well, what you're looking for is that connection piece, but you will eventually have relief. And that's the piece that gets missed. If you don't do this and you just get into acting
or talking about things.
Exactly. You're going to continue to carry the emotional residue, the emotional weight that is there. And there's so much science about how this isn't good for your nervous system. This causes dis-ease in the body, dis-ease. You create, and actually it's a biological conflict. I know something more that you're going into, and you could take this further, that all of this emotion that's stored, it's in your primal mind. And when you're not dealing with it, you're really creating internal conflict within yourself. And so, well, what you really want is to feel relief. And so when you do that and your partner shows up this way and you feel that connection, and maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes, and you maybe just allow the emotion. Yeah, an hour. Then you do feel relief. You feel lighter. People say, well, I feel better. That emotion has been allowed to be moved and expressed and accepted and validated. And then so it does feel like it has lifted. Now, I want you to go further into that. But I just wanted to say this all has to happen before you get into what will be the last step that we're not covering this time, but it's the discovering of the solution or the path forward. You have to do this. You can't just find a path and go down it, because also once you have the relief and you're connected, you're going to be able to discover better solutions than if you don't go down this step and you're just avoiding.
Well, yeah, because you're especially feeling like a team. And that's what I was going to go into more of, was just about the logical steps to take. The actions will be more clear and effective after that, exactly like you said it. And so if you do have to come up with a plan, like we're working with 2 of our really close friends right now who are trying to get more sleep at night, right? Like their kiddos, it's been hard for them. It's like, okay, let's talk about the game plan. But after, I was just there listening to how it felt to her, and let the emotion come up. And so the game plan, the next steps to take become much easier and more united after that. Then come up with the plan. How are we going to tackle this? But from a more vulnerable place, as opposed to, again, when you're just coping and surviving with it and not being vulnerable, your primal instincts will kick in, and then you'll be like, let's just cut them out of our life, let's do this. And it can seem kind of like, let me completely remove this pain point, when really it's because it's uncomfortable to be vulnerable about how it feels.
Yeah. It's just easier to cut people out. Mm-hmm. And you see that so often now in society, probably because people aren't used to feeling the emotion. They don't know how to act. They don't know how to be. And maybe it's a byproduct of social media where you can say anything that you want to anyone without any responsibility and without being responsible at all for the impact that any of your words have on anyone. And I think that shows up in marriage. I mean, it wasn't intentional, but it's easier just to say, let's just move on. Let's just cut these people out, and not get to what's real. And I do have one more thing, but I see that something is burning in you.
Well, I just wanted to say, sometimes depending on the situation or what was said or done between whoever this has to do with or the circumstance, maybe taking a pause or space is what is needed.
Yeah.
But then, being clear about, will there be future repair conversations? That kind of is where the plan comes in, because space sometimes is what's needed.
Yeah. My fault will probably be to add too much detail to one single podcast. But it's burning in me. What I want to say is, because you will act from the projected future of the unresolved emotion. And I could give you the example, but we probably have to get too detailed. Until you move the emotion, all of a sudden, you're not living into the projected future, which is one where you were avoiding or just moving on or taking the easy way out or not dealing with this emotion. So then the projected future is, we don't align with these people and we're going to cut them out. Mm-hmm. And that's the only path you're going to see. So until you move the emotion and you connect. And the one thing I want to say was, I also saw a moment to provide assurance. Mm-hmm. Once you were able to express, be vulnerable, I went into the emotion with you, and I let that be long enough. What came to me was to provide the assurance.
Yeah.
And that was like where we could pick ourselves up. And I said to you, once it all came out, that's not you. And I said, we've done the very best that we can in life. And we've showed up the very best we could ever show up for Sky. And I'm so proud of what we did. And that was the assurance for us to now take back our truth about who we are and how we've shown up and acknowledge ourselves. And that, like, you could, literally and figuratively got us up off the floor. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it was a part of the assurance. But once again, if you don't do this step, you're going to live into a projected future. Yep. And you have to do this to see more clarity on a more beneficial future.
One thing to just go back to, because I know some of you, when we were talking about how coping mechanisms for people can either be lashing out, kind of taking it out on sometimes even your partner, or the withdrawing. Either way, if these outside life obstacles and hardships are at all leading to conflict within you as a couple, or maybe other topics, you aren't repairing. One of the top things we're advocates of is you have to repair. And so one thing I just have to say, because it's related to this, right, is life obstacles, things that just feel really hard, is if you don't have already our guide about making up and moving forward, the only reason I'm going to be able to have some of these hard conversations too with the people involved is because I have this repair process, right? And even though parts of me are like, I don't want to do this, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to do the work, even if it takes multiple conversations. So make sure you get our making up and moving forward guide, where we spell it out step by step, how to repair, especially whether it's an argument or a conflict or a life obstacle that comes up. Get prompts, reflections, mistakes to, counteract.
Yeah, so powerful.
Honestly, one of the best resources we've ever created, and it's only $19, you guys. Like, this is what people come to us for coaching, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and you get this for $19.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking to myself, who's doing coaching for hundreds of dollars? Thousands. We coach people for thousands of dollars.
Right, exactly.
You're getting what we do with couples for $19.
Yeah. So go to thecouplesexperience.com/guide, or that link will be in the show notes. Again, if you're going to type that URL in, thecouplesexperience.com/guide. You have to have the /guide to get that and get immediate access to it.
So it just came to me that this is really like a part 1 of 3 if we were going to do it. So it's coping with life's obstacles and hardships as a couple. The first part of this is to express, to connect, so you can feel the relief. Part 2 would be about how do you now discover the right beneficial solution. And then a part 3 from what you just said would be really the path to repair. And to do a repair with people outside of your life is...
Or outside your marriage, you mean?
Yeah, a little bit different than what you do directly with your partner. The steps are really the same, but there are some different things because they might not be committed to the same exact thing. They might not be a yes to the same agreements that a couple would have. But either way, the steps to repair. So that would be kind of a part 3. But this was express. It was about connect and feel the relief.
Yes. So we hope that this was helpful. If you have had hardship show up in this new year, you're not alone. And please give us a 5-star rating if you find value on whichever platform you are listening to. That helps us get the word out there. We love you guys, and we will connect with you on the next episode.